Stay until the end. This story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, say you be a subscribe, and turn on notifications for more life-changing stories. The wind was merciless that night, slicing through the city like an unforgiving blade. Dante Williams hunched deeper into his hoodie, his fingers numb despite being shoved into his pockets. The layers he wore barely held back the cold, but it wasn't just the temperature that made his body ache. It was the exhaustion, the hunger, the weight of another night spent on the streets. He sat on the concrete steps of the subway station, his usual spot. The city moved around him, fast and indifferent. People hurried past without looking, wrapped in warm coats and their own worlds, avoiding eye contact as if acknowledging him would make him real. He wasn't a person anymore. He was part of the scenery. Once, he had been someone. Once, he had a dream. Music had been his escape, his passion. He used to believe his voice mattered, that one day, he'd make it. But life had a way of grinding hope into dust. First, he lost his job, then his apartment, then his pride. Now, all he had left was this night, and the hope that tomorrow would come. A group of young professionals passed, laughing as they stepped into a sleek black car, their breath visible in the freezing air. Dante watched but didn't resent them. Resentment took energy, and he barely had enough to stay awake. Then, something changed, the presence. It wasn't the usual rush of people moving past. This was different. Someone had stopped. Dante lifted his head slowly. A woman stood in front of him, wrapped in a long coat, a hood pulled over her head. Large sunglasses hid most of her face, but even through the dim streetlight, there was something familiar about her. Most people, when they stopped, tossed a few bills and kept walking. She didn't. She just stood there, hands tucked into her coat pockets, studying him, really seeing him. Dante's throat went dry. He braced himself for the usual questions, the pity, the forced sympathy. But instead, she spoke, soft but firm. "Have you eaten today?" The question caught him off guard. People didn't ask. They assumed. They threw spare change without a word, looking through him like he wasn't even there. Dante hesitated, his stomach twisting. He hadn't eaten since the morning before, but saying it out loud made it feel too real, too raw. He shook his head. The woman nodded, reaching into the tote bag slung over her shoulder. She pulled out a takeout container, still warm, and handed it to him. The heat seeped into his frozen fingers. "It's fresh, eat." Dante swallowed hard. "Thank you." But before he could even pry open the lid, she reached into her coat again and pulled out something else, a sealed envelope. She held it out. "Take this, but don't open it until tomorrow." Dante frowned, staring at the envelope like it might vanish if he touched it. He'd received money before, enough for a meal, maybe, but never an envelope. Never like this. "Why?" he asked cautiously. The woman tilted her head, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Because you need to wake up believing tomorrow's different." Her words sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Before he could ask another question, she took a step back, adjusting the hood of her coat. And then, without another word, she was gone. Have you ever felt invisible? Let us know in the comments. Dante sat frozen, the envelope in his hands feeling heavier than it should. He turned it over, fingers tracing the crisp edges. What was inside? Money? A letter? Some kind of joke? His instincts told him not to trust it. Nothing in his life had ever come easy. But the woman, who was she? The city hummed around him, the usual sounds of traffic, distant sirens, the shuffle of feet moving with purpose. Yet Dante felt like he was outside of it all, stuck in a moment he didn't understand. He glanced down at the takeout container, steam still rising through the tiny vents in the lid. His stomach twisted painfully. He hadn't realized just how hungry he was. Carefully, He popped it open. The smell hit him first. Something warm, savory, real food. Not scraps, not a half-eaten sandwich from a dumpster. He didn't even hesitate, shoveling the first bite into his mouth, barely chewing before swallowing. It was the best thing he'd tasted in months. As he ate, his eyes kept darting to the envelope beside him. Curiosity gnawed at him. The woman had been deliberate. Don't open it until tomorrow. But why? What difference did a few hours make? The thought bounced around in his head, tempting him, urging him to tear it open. Was she watching? Testing him? But then he heard her voice again, soft but steady. Because you need to wake up believing tomorrow's different. Dante exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands over his face. What if, just for one night, he let himself believe it? That something, anything, good was waiting on the other side of the sunrise. He tucked the envelope deep into his hoodie pocket, pressing it against his chest as if he could absorb whatever fate had in store. The night dragged on, the cold settling into his bones. He curled into himself, the takeout box empty beside him. The city moving forward while he remained still. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely hopeless. Morning came slowly, the first slivers of sunlight stretching across the pavement. Dante sat up, heart pounding as his fingers reached for the envelope. The moment of truth. Whatever was inside would either change everything or be just another disappointment. He inhaled deeply and tore it open. Would you have waited until morning or opened it right away? Let us know in the comments. Dante's breath was shaky as he unfolded the paper inside the envelope, his fingers cold and stiff. His eyes darted across the words, expecting. He didn't know what. But it wasn't this. This is a start. Don't stop. His heartbeat stuttered. The handwriting was neat, confident, like whoever wrote it had no doubt in what they were saying. But it wasn't just a note. There was a check. Dante's pulse slammed against his ribs as his eyes scanned the number. $10,000. His throat went dry. He blinked, looked again, expecting his mind to have played some cruel trick on him. But the number was still there, staring back at him. Real. Unbelievable. His hands trembled as he gripped the check tighter. This wasn't possible. Nobody just handed out money like this, especially not to someone like him. People barely gave him a second glance, let alone a second chance. His mind raced through every possible explanation. Was it a mistake? A scam? A setup? He searched the envelope again, hoping for more, for answers, but all he found was one more line at the bottom of the note. Meet me at the Avalon, 9 p.m. Dante froze. The Avalon? He knew the name. Everybody did. It was a high-end lounge downtown, the kind of place that didn't even let guys like him near the front door. This had to be a joke. A cruel one. Maybe someone was playing with him, watching from a distance, waiting for him to show up just to laugh in his face. He should rip up the check, walk away, pretend none of this ever happened. But then he looked back at the note. This is a start. Don't stop. If your private moment went viral overnight, how would you handle it? Dante sat on the edge of his cot at the shelter, staring at his phone screen. His name, his face, were everywhere. The notifications kept coming, faster than he could read. His hands clenched around the device, like he could stop the internet from spinning his life into something he couldn't control. He had gone to the Avalon for answers. Instead, he had become a headline. He scrolled through the latest articles, his chest tightening. Everyone had an opinion. He's lucky. Rihanna could have given that money to anyone. Why didn't she just donate to a charity instead of making it a show? Bet he's going to blow it. Watch him disappear in a month. Dante squeezed his eyes shut, pressing his knuckles against his forehead. They didn't know him. They didn't know the nights he spent curled up on subway benches, the hunger that clawed at his stomach, the dreams he had let rot because life didn't give second chances to people like him. But now, He had one. And the whole world was watching. His gut twisted. He hadn't even had time to process what Rihanna's gesture meant, let alone what to do next. Was he supposed to post about it? Thank her publicly? Stay quiet and let the media run wild with their own version of the truth? His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a comment. It was a message. Unknown number. You don't owe them anything. Just make it count. Dante's breath caught. There was no name attached, no signature, but he knew exactly who had sent it. He stared at the words, "Make it count." That was the only thing that mattered. He could let the internet define him, let them paint him as a charity case, a viral moment that would fade in a week, or he could take control of his own story. Slowly, he opened the camera app. His reflection stared back, dark circles under his eyes, his hoodie wrinkled from the night before. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a celebrity's orbit, but he did look like someone who had been given a chance. He hit record. "All right," he said, voice rough but steady. "Let's get one thing straight. I never asked for this. I didn't expect it. But now that it happened, I'm not gonna waste it." He took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. This wasn't for the media. This was for him. "I don't care what anyone thinks about Rihanna or why she did it. All I know is someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I'm not gonna let that go to waste." He paused, fingers tightening around the phone. This was his moment, not theirs. "So if you're waiting to see me fail, don't hold your breath." He hit post. Within minutes, the video was everywhere. But this time, the comments were different. Respect. He's owning his story. This isn't about Rihanna anymore. This is about him. Man, I hope he wins. We need more stories like this. For the first time in years, Dante didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, not because of Rihanna, not because of the money, but because he had finally decided to step forward and claim his future. A week later, he walked into a music studio for the first time since losing everything. He didn't know where this road would take him, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to find out. Final call to action. What would you do if the world was watching? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories.